Today, I'm going to be going over the free agency moves and trades that the Seahawks have made so far this offseason. In my next video 2 weeks from now, I plan on making another free agency video, going over whatever teams I think are the most interesting. But for this video, I'm focusing on the Seahawks because even though I'm a Seahawks fan, I've somehow never made any Seahawks-specific content on this channel. And as a Seahawks fan, I have a lot to say about these moves and very little of it is positive. But without further ado, let's start by talking about who the Seahawks have gotten rid of. We released George Fant, who got hurt almost immediately in 2024 and barely played, as well as guys like Rayshon Jenkins, Draymond Jones, and Roy Robertson Harris, all of whom were pretty disappointing. We also got rid of our starting guard LAKEY Tomlinson, although I don't think he was really that good, as well as cornerback Trey Brown, who was actually a very good depth corner for a few years before completely falling off a cliff in 2024. On top of that, there's also Stone Forsythe and Artie Burns, who are both good depth pieces, but not much more than that. And Farrell Brown, who without exaggeration I can only think of negative things he's done, not even anything neutral. But let's get to what you really came here for, the big names. We're going to start with Tyler Lockett, who, as a Seahawks fan, I was hoping would be a Seahawk for his entire career. He's probably my favorite player in the entire league. But realistically, at this stage of his career, with his production dwindling, the Seahawks weren't going to be able to pay him $30 million next year. Part of me is still hopeful that we'll be able to re-sign him to a cheaper deal, but that seems too good to be true. In addition to that, we traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers for a second-round pick and some late-round pick swaps. And I'm honestly okay with this move. That may be surprising, but even as a Seahawks fan, I've always felt like DK Metcalf was a little bit overrated. Don't get me wrong, anyone would be lucky to have him on their team, but frustrating is the perfect word for him. He fumbles a lot, he drops the ball a lot, he draws a lot of penalties, and he's just maddeningly inconsistent. It's definitely a love-hate relationship with him, as Steelers fans are surely about to find out. But then comes the real bombshell, trading Geno Smith to the Raiders for a third-round pick, and subsequently replacing him with Sam Darnold in free agency. And let me tell you, I was livid when this happened. For two main reasons. Number one, I think Sam Darnold is a downgrade from Geno Smith. And number two, Sam Darnold was going from throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, to Jackson Smith-Njigba and a bunch of plumbers and used car salesmen. Now my gripe about Sam Darnold being a downgrade from Geno was slightly alleviated by the fact that it later came out that Geno had requested the trade. At the time, it just seemed like we traded him out of the blue, but if he wanted out, then it is what it is. And as for the lack of receiving help, we slightly remedied that by signing guys like Cooper Kupp and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, as well as River Craycraft and Eric Saubert, although I'm not expecting much from them, making this a still not great but passable receiving core, at least relative to what Darnold had in Minnesota. But even so, as soon as we traded Geno Smith, there was one correct option and one correct option only. We just had to tear everything down and rebuild. I said that to my dad the moment Geno was traded, and I even thought to myself that the last thing in the world we should do is sign Sam Darnold. And then we did a few days later. Look, it's not a terrible move, but as I'm sure you can guess, I fully expect Sam Darnold to regress. And it just feels like we're dooming ourselves to continue being mediocre for the foreseeable future. I mean, at this point, I'd rather see this team bottom out and go 3-14 than endure another 9-8 season. Not to mention, at least with Geno, he was clutch, and there was this feeling that if we could build a good enough team around him, we could actually go somewhere. As we saw with the Vikings last year, I don't trust Sam Darnold to win big games no matter how good the team around him is. And yet somehow after all that ranting about quarterbacks, it gets even worse. The Seahawks signed DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year, $42 million deal, which is just puzzling. Like, hello, it's not 2017 anymore. At this stage of his career, DeMarcus Lawrence is little more than a depth piece or a role player. Something we don't need because we have plenty of depth on the defensive line already. Maybe, just maybe, instead of overpaying for a washed up, past his prime defensive line player we don't need, we could have spent that money to, I don't know, address the one glaring weakness of this team, the interior offensive line, with a guy like Tevin Jenkins maybe, who the Browns signed for dirt cheap. Like, what the hell are we doing? If you want to know why the Seahawks go 9-8 every year, It's because we draft like a team that should be 14-3, but John Schneider's annual free agency disaster drags us down to mediocrity. Now that was a lot of complaining, so let's talk about some more positive moves. There's not much to speak of, but hey, there's something. As I mentioned earlier, we signed Cooper Kupp and Marquez Valdes-Scantling to make up for our holes at receiver, and we were also able to re-sign key pieces like Josh Jobe and Jarran Reed, the latter of which I didn't think we would be able to retain. And of course, we finally re-signed Ernest Jones. I mean, goddamn, it took long enough. But I'm just happy it happened at this point. So let's review everything. The positives are that we re-signed Josh Jobe, Jarran Reed, and Ernest Jones. And we signed guys like Cooper Kupp and Marquez Valdes-Scantling to fill the void that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett left at receiver. That's about it. I don't view the DK Metcalf trade as a positive nor a negative. And similarly, it sucks to lose Tyler Lockett, but financially there was just no way we could keep him. However, I think the DeMarcus Lawrence signing and everything we did at the quarterback position were complete disasters. We should not have signed Lawrence, period. And if we had to get rid of Geno, we should have just tore everything down and rebuilt from the ground up. Signing Sam Darnold does nothing for us other than guarantee that we're going nowhere. If I had to assign a grade, I would give the Seahawks a D+ for their offseason moves thus far. At this point, I'm just hoping they can make up for it in the draft, which they typically do. Not enough to get us out of the mud, though. But anyways, that'll be it for this video. It's a bit different from anything I've made before, but that makes sense since it's my first offseason making videos. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe.